You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Shoe In Show. Thanks for joining us this week. As always, we look at a plethora of footwear topics and issues impacting our industry. Today is no different. Today we'll be focusing specifically around biomaterials and an area we typically don't talk about biomaterials, which is the outsole. I know we talk a lot about midsole and we talk about insoles and everything in between, but the outsole is kind of this space that in many ways is a huge concern. By just, I can look at my shoes right now and see I've scuffed off the bottom, right? And so you want to talk about like environmental impact, you can see it. It's not just smushing it together when we're stepping on it like the midsole, but you can actually see your impact as it's scraping off as I'm running my 25Ks and my triathlons. And then I wake up from my nap, Matt Priest, and I feel great. So maybe you can tee up today who we got on the show.
That's hilarious, man. 25Ks. Yeah, it's interesting because the outsole, the material of the outsole, the material of the upper are like the two most important aspects of a shoe when you're talking about classification. So the more we talk about innovation in outsole material, it's fascinating to me because as a nerd in footwear classification, this stuff really, really does matter from a performance perspective, from a sustainability perspective, and from a classification perspective. And so I'm super excited to have Thomas Bogle on, who's the founder and CEO at Solum. And he is an innovator by nature and is focused on driving more and more amazing materials to many different products, including footwear. So Thomas, welcome to the Shoe In Show program, my friend. And out of the gate, the question that we always like to ask kind of the newbies to this discussion or to the program is, what is your shoe story? Like, how did you get involved in working in outsole materials and in partnership with shoe companies? Walk us through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Matt, Andy, thanks for having me on today. It's a pleasure being on here today. And shoe story. Oh man, everything for me, I think, starts with running. I'm a big runner my whole life, and it goes back to high school. I went to a big 5A high school in Houston, Texas. Where football stadiums are bigger than some college and NFL type of outfits. And, despite being pretty good, fairly decent at sports, I couldn't make it on a team, couldn't make it on every team I tried out on. And I somehow found my way on this, renegade band of pirate outfitters known as the cross country team, to many, and just fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with running. And I think it really has to do just with the simplicity of the sport. It's just you and a pair of shoes, and you can add the world around you in that. And so it's kind of a way to connect with your environment. So I did that for a bit, obviously track, and again, wasn't exceptional in it. But as life went on, running has just kind of always been that constant for me. And so if you fast forward a bit, I went to got my first job in the footwear industry. Not long after college, working for a manufacturer in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And these guys were exceptional in ski boot fitting, long-time heritage in racing and winter sports and Olympic athletes that they worked with. So it was this complete, autonomy of how the foot works and an integration with the boot and with shoes. And my running continued at that time, and I was putting in more miles and, doing longer races and trail running and stuff. And, from my time working in out of shoe stores when I was younger, I always this obsession with how that shoe worked, and I was always that guy that would go and run with, hundreds different of shoes and catalog them, have a little book and just talk about, write down little notes of what this shoe felt like and how long I got out of this shoe. So it's kind of micro obsessed with that interaction between myself and the shoe and my running. So as I start to put these more races up in Steamboat, and by the way, if you're not familiar with Steamboat, it's pristine doesn't become to describe it. It's an amazing place up in Northwest Colorado. It's the headwaters of not one, but two rivers, major water sources in the Western watershed, the Colorado and the Green. The Colorado comes out of this magical place called the Never Summer Wilderness. So you're finding yourself running out in these amazing places. And for me, I was blowing through shoes. For one race training, I probably went through 3 running shoes in the span of 3 or 6 months. And so it became this really, important moment in my life in terms of crossover where running and shoes and, having this job in manufacturing where you're seeing RSL lists and mixing lists and environmental reports of what's going into this outsole compound. And then at the end of the day, running that compound into the ground, knowing that someone in LA downstream is probably picking up some of these outsole microfragments from this. And so that's probably a really long about way of just my footwear story, just in terms of running and manufacturing and eventually kind of genesis of Solum.
Yeah. So really quickly for Solum, what is Solum? What are you trying to accomplish with the company you started?
Yeah, so Solum's a biomaterials company, and we are looking to re-engineer outsoles using plant-based alternatives. So these are alternatives to synthetics and plastics, and we're doing it with nutrient waste. These are the leftover nutrients from a plant after it gets harvested. And what's really interesting to us about the nutrient side of this is not only are they replacing the synthetics in that, but these are the building blocks for that plant cell structure. So it's what adding the rigidity, the thickness, and reinforcement to that plant in order for it to grow. And so when we are repurposing that into an outsole, we see those same reinforcement benefits that come into it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, so we got your shoe story. How are you working with brands? Like, talk to us about the collaborative process as you engage with brands. What are they looking for that you can provide? What do you provide that they may not be looking for, but that they need? Talk to us about how that process works.
Yeah. So what we provide is an additive pellet. So for us, everything begins and ends with soils, right? So soils are kind of the driving force behind nature's circularity, and plants are absorbing these nutrients from the soil. And so we team up with farmers and ag communities around the country to take over that leftover waste. And we are doing the nutrient extraction from that waste and putting it into a pelletized form. So what we're really looking to do is team up with brands to provide that nutrient additive to their manufacturers where there's no supply chain disruption. This plastic replacement, petrochemical replacement, can go directly into their products. In addition, we can provide Solum formulations. So these are finished rubber formulations that kind of act as a jumpstart to getting that development off of the ground and answering some of those questions within the material compounding to get going in the right direction. So we very much see sustainability as this journey. We sometimes get eye rolls when we say that, but there's really no better definition, I think, for it because there's such a diverse spectrum in terms of where brands are tackling sustainability on. So the very nice thing, I think, working with Solum in this regard, in this aspect, is for us to be able to kind of come in and help brands where they are within that journey, where they might be struggling with. And really what I mean by that is having this kind of customization type process of putting this additive in, putting a nutrient bioadditive in at, say, at 20%. If performance, say, is more of a concern to you or you're at that stage, more performance work, construction type of categories, all the way up to our plastic-free formulations. So the ability to work with plants in the same regard as a plastic and create outsole compounds that have no plastic content in that. And so what's really interesting about the latter aspect of that is that by changing what we make the material from, we can therefore redirect the entire trajectory of that product life cycle to have a either circularity effect to it or just non-damaging effect. And that's really the problems that we see within footwear life cycles, product life cycles of that. There's really kind of two problems that exist. The first being that when we make our products with plastics, there is raw material extraction that is involved with that, digging that fossil based petroleum out of the ground, and having to burn it, refine it to make petrochemical. And so you see those effects pop up both in raw material and processing, and then eventually waste, because there's no way to actually dispose of that at the end. But then there's a lesser known problem, I think, that comes within the manufacturing of chemical toxicity, which doesn't get nearly enough attention, I think, within this. And so what we look at is in terms of remaking the product and starting with the right ingredients. Earth has this ability, our nature has this ability to recycle these and know how to deal with them. But when we make it with more harmful ingredients, those problems tend to magnify the farther they go down the product life cycle. And it's harder to capture it the farther you go down that life cycle too.
And I think these conversations are important because we see regulation heading in that direction, especially in European Union, where they are focusing heavily on microplastics in the environment there. And so it started off with, like water bottles in the water, sea waste, plastics in the water, systems like that. It spread and has magnified within policymaking, where they're looking at how, particularly for apparel, it's when you wash clothes and you have microplastics released during the washing process that's getting out into streams. And so they're evaluating particularly how you design out these microplastics, and then also how they retrofit or look at washing machines to capture more of those before it exits out of the machine. And so they're looking at both of those. For footwear, obviously it's a bit different. You don't have a lot of people washing their shoes per se, but it is that outsole abrasion that happens when you're walking. And it doesn't matter whether I'm doing my 25K, wherever it is that I feel like doing it, running out there, or if I'm just walking down the street. Over time, the shoe wears out. It abrases off because of the pavement or the sidewalk. Materials are rubbing against each other and it's coming off. Solum is one of the few companies I know trying to tackle the outsole. So many are looking at insole, mids, all these things, which is great. But the outsole is very tricky, I think, in that aspect. But it's going to be critical that footwear companies look at that, because they're going to be forced to by regulation. So if this is not on your radar, it should be. Solum's a company you can talk to about that in particular. And Thomas, I am interested in, because we always have this discussion around innovative materials and performance. We know that the footwear industry follows specs that have been developed years ago. And in some ways, it was based on a different product. And as Matt opened up, we talked about customs. We've got customs rules from the 1930s, probably when people are still wearing wooden shoes. And so, only joking slightly, but it's the same thing today on these innovative materials. We're looking at specs for today's materials that were made 15, 20 years ago that were based on plastics. I'm happy to report some of the data that we do see on the biomaterial side as they're starting to outperform some of the plastic traditional materials, which I think is a great leap forward for us, because that has traditionally been the concern is if I have this, it's not going to perform the same way. Well, now we see that it is. But, and we've talked about this a bit, but I feel like it's the opportunity for companies to start to reevaluate those old spec sheets, to question why they're requesting the percents and the makeups that they are. So from your perspective, as we look at this, it seems like a great opportunity to, when they're creating new product types, to look at their spec sheet and say, should we reevaluate what percents we're looking for in order to obtain more bio or obtain more value for the consumer?
Yeah, absolutely. And, too, Andy, just quickly going back before we get into performance, just going into what you're talking about with abrasion, microplastics, showing that up on government compliance, particularly EU. What a lot of people don't know is rubber abrasion accounts for the second largest source of microplastics in our ocean. So this is coming from outsoles, not just shoes. A large contingent of it is obviously car tires, manufacturing equipment. And this really wasn't on a lot of people's radar for all that long. It wasn't until a few years back, Washington State University noticed a pretty large population die-off in coho salmon and started to research this a little bit more and traced it all the way back up the proverbial streams, quite literal streams, to the fish ingesting wear particles coming off of the roads and tires. And it's, again, it kind of goes back to the chemical toxicity. It's not so much that they have a piece of plastic in their stomach that they're hitting, but it's that these particles are packed with chemical toxicity that is used to make the rubber last longer. And specifically what we're talking about is a pretty nasty little chemical called 6-PPD. Synthetic rubber has about 78 known toxic chemicals in it, according to the EPA, but 6-PPD, if you do a quick Google search, anybody out there, click on the news button, you will be dumbfounded by the amount of news articles and research that is going into this right now. I think a big commercial fishing group, 13 of them are suing tire makers right now just for the use of this. And this gets into our conversation about performance too, because it's a paradox and it's controversial. It's really hard to talk about because in the context of talking about phasing out these chemicals, you're also talking about decreasing things like durability in products. You're talking about, because there's really no synthetic alternatives to a lot of these things. And that doesn't always sit well. But there's silver linings, I think, in a lot of these when we talk about performance. And when we talk about, you're saying outdated standards, there is a degree that our industry needs to face with the over engineering of some of these products. And this is kind of where the controversy comes in and how it directly relates with outsole durability and what a lot of people would feel like scaling back, right, or dumbing down of our product. But it's not in our mind. It's a shift of the paradigm in the way how you can enter environmentalism into the conversation where it currently is not part of that conversation. I think maybe one of the best analogies we can think about this as in terms of performance is looking at the rise of organic sections within our grocery store. Few decades ago, totally unheard of. Everybody's buying just what's available there. But the organic boom obviously is something that can't be ignored and fits its way into most people's kitchens in some way or another, even if they don't know it. And you take like an organic apple, for example, that sits on your shelf and that's not going to last as long inherently in your kitchen on your shelf, but it's not supposed to. There's a myriad of benefits that come with that apple that people buy into, and they even sometimes pay more for, that they get in replacement of longevity or something like that. On the other side of that spectrum, you're looking at something like what our outsoles are currently, or something probably like Apple Jacks. If you want to try to make that comparison, they would probably last, 2 years or something in your pantry closet. And the only reason they are able to last that long is because the existence of artificial preservatives within those Apple Jacks that you're eating, you're ingesting in that, and could potentially, harm your body. And without those artificial preservatives, it's just sugar dust. And so what we're asking brands to do is make very conscientious trade-offs and prioritize and start small, start in the right spots towards healthier options for these. And I think that's kind of one of the big misnomers about this whole thing when Solum gets approached with a brand is everybody thinks they have to go big, that this has to replace somehow their entire line because environmental threat is breathing down our shoulders, and that they have to start with their highest performing line. And it's a little bit counterintuitive. Kind of here's where the controversy comes in, and that we like to take head on, is that take, for example, kid shoes, lifestyle type shoes too. They should not be lasting 8 years. There's absolutely no commercial use case or statistic that would say that product should be lasting 8 years. And yet that's what we're seeing the plastics in the product yielding in terms of a performance standpoint. And so that's a little bit kind of towards the over-engineering of some of these products and how we can be rethinking about these. We're kind of looking at the uses for them. And, Andy, and Matt, your guys' FDRA Consumer Sustainability Survey is some of the best at, I think, highlighting this. From those surveys, we see consumers are expecting their shoes to maybe last 3 years. Durability starts at 1 year. And yet you take like a brand standard for a DIN abrasion score, measures the longevity of an outsole, the durability of that outsole, or down about 80 DIN. That translates to about 8-10 years of existence. And we're seeing that across so many different categories. And so the trade-offs aren't huge for something like Solum, as well as other biomaterials out there. When we're talking about longevity, we're looking about 8%. So if your shoe lasts 8 years, we're looking at about 7 years, 4 months. So it hardly registers on the consumer level in terms of what's being traded off here, but the environmental advantages that come to something like that are massive. And so, again, from what we're made of, what goes into this product, being plant nutrients, as you're using Solum's outsole, these plant nutrients are able to come off the outsole, go back into the environment where they have a positive impact on that world around them. So we're very much looking at encouraging people's steps, encouraging the use and the wear even of these products, knowing the advantages on the end of life and what it goes back into.
There's a paradox on this, Thomas, because the industry wants to sell more shoes, right? That's how it maintains its competitiveness. It's how it maintains profit margin and moves more units. We bring in 2.5 billion pairs of shoes, give or take, every single year. That's over 7 pairs of shoes for every single person in this country every single year. And so you are coming with a proposal. You're meeting them where they're at, because you're saying, look, there are other industries that build in obsolescence into their product. Look at the iPhone, right? Every year a new iPhone comes out and everyone runs the old one's just fine, but they run to a new one. And here you're saying, hey, look, we can continue to operate on your turf, meaning helping you sell more goods by delivering more sustainable inputs that go into your goods that actually lower the durability or the longevity. I like longevity better because durability has like this, it kind of conjures up, it won't last for the need that you have. But you just made a very eloquent point on that. It'll last plenty long for your need and then some, even using our product, right? So to me, it's like a longevity thing. But you can have a durable product that forces the consumer to go buy more frequently. And the irony and the kicker is that it's actually more supportive of the environment, right? And so that's right, yeah. I think that's like the secret sauce to me, because everyone wants obsolescence in their shoes, so people go buy more product. They want to move more volume. Right. And so I think that it's a brilliant move. And the start small thing is, you see Saucony, you see these other brands that have started small on the sustainability journey with certain lines. They don't try to overhaul the entire assortment, and they're succeeding in those areas. And it becomes a test case scenario to how you broaden it out to your broader assortment. So kudos to you guys. I think you're meeting them where they're at, and that's important for partners in the space for sure.
Very, very much so. And it's a tough space because biodegradability, I think, can come with that negative connotation. And keeping in mind, we don't pursue biodegradability just due to a lot of different state regulations. I know California has outlawed the use of the term in the context of food packaging and other things. But I think a lot of people come with that mindset that is this just going to degrade on your foot? And we couldn't get across more enough of the strength, the resiliency, and the durability that comes with a product like this. The trade-off, again, is very, very, very small. And again, it's all kind of nature inspired. You look at a tree, trees have this ability to grow to be as tall as some of the skyscrapers in New York City. They last for 2,500 years. Just unfathomable amount of longevity and life-living thing. And yet everything within that tree's life cycle has a positive impact on the world around it in terms of drawing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, dropping leaves each year that provide nutrient sources, and its decomposition, right, at end of life, and spawning new trees too. So these are the types of inspirations I think we like to take from nature and place into our material technology. And it circles back to this idea of humans don't have a pollution problem. We have a design problem. And that's really at the core of what we're doing here. And Matt, to your kind of paradox, it's a tough one, I think, not just for us to grapple with, but brands too. because the problem, the solution is kind of hidden within that problem. I mean, every shoe that's ever been made and landfilled, let's say that has plastics in it, is still in existence today. And it will be for another some 1,000 years. That is the problem. And the solution is about rolling back some of that durability and not having it last that long. So it becomes this very fine balance of, we want it to last exactly this long on the shoe, but not that long in the landfill. And how do you get to that? So, obviously there's some knowledge gap, I think, that can come into it, but what we can do is make, look at plant-based solutions. So again, nature has this program in which to take it back. And those nature-based solutions are durable enough to meet consumer expectations, to get past majority brand standards. And at end of life, because those nutrients, because those plant byproducts are in existence, they really become the food for microbes, targets. So they break down a little bit quicker than at the end.
So you've basically created a shoe fertilizing company. Congratulations. Super cool. I will say, Matt, we'll have to figure out a new sponsor. We've lost the Applejack sponsor. They have canceled their contract. But good news, that's all right. Because of my massive consumption of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, I think we can pick up General Mills again, no problem. So that's all right. You're the first guest who's ever lost us a sponsor, but that's okay. I think you made your point loud and clear. And the folks out there eating the Apple Jacks who just put it down on the table and walked away, good for you. If people want to learn more, Thomas, about Solum, I'm sure they can hit you up on LinkedIn. But what's your website address that they can go to?
Yeah, we are at solumtread.com.
Solumtread.com. You got it. All right. And also, they've been at our events. One of their lead scientists, Dr. Eugene, spoke at our event last year at our sustainability summit about soil health and soil issues to help the industry understand it more deeply. And then Thomas spoke this year as well. And I'm sure we'll see him again next year. So, and if you need us to be a conduit as well to introduce you to Thomas, I always tell people, and this is a constant, but always reach out. Like, even if you don't think there's a current need, it's important that you learn this stuff. There is a little bit of a small learning curve that you need to understand. And we talked a little bit about performance and specs and things like that. I think it behooves us all to take a look at what we're doing and not just be robotic about our choices in our industry anymore. And I say that not because of anything else other than this. You're going to be forced to by regulations at some point. And so it's important to start now so that you're ahead of the game versus being behind the 8 ball in that sense. So, Thomas, thanks for coming on today and talking a little bit about Solum and your journey and what you guys are doing. And we're big believers in the movement and the product that you guys have, and appreciate the solutions you're trying to provide for our members and the industry at large. So thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, Andy, Matt, thank you guys. So appreciate the support, and looking forward to see you guys at the Sustainability Summit.
Awesome. Folks, shoeandshow.com is the website where you can go back and listen to all our episodes and download all those great conversations. As always, we appreciate you joining us. Next week, new episode drops as always. Keep close. There's a lot of changes, a lot of shifts happening, not just in sustainability, but supply chains and customs and everything else. The industry's never been more dynamic. It also has never had more hits against it externally. So FDRA is here to try to help you navigate that and see what's coming and prepare and adapt. And as well as we can, try to provide collaborative solutions and bring people together to strengthen our community. So if we can do anything for you, reach out to us, fdra.org. You can email us at info@fdra.org.com on any topics or challenges you see. Perhaps we can help you. But as always, we appreciate the opportunity. And until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.